Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcasts co-production recorded on a Wagbical country. And I pay my respects to all elders, past and present, and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show.
Gosh, it taught me so much, I think. I'm going to say a lot about belonging, a lot about courage, a lot about thinking, creating characters who we watch and go through all these sort of really big challenges in their lives. It teaches us how to deal with them ourselves, I think.
Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journey to publication. If you are looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, author of When Men Cry and your host for today's show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. If you enjoy this show, or indeed any other shows on the Words and Nerds platform, jump online and give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review, wherever you are listening. Thank you for listening to us and for supporting the Australian book industry. You can also find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. Today, I'm joined by Lauren Crozier, and we're here today to talk about her YA debut novel, The Best Witch in Paris, which won the 2023 Text Prize for Young Adult and Children's Writing, and you can get a copy of it right now in the description. We will be discussing mild spoilers, so I suggest you grab yourself a copy right now, or at least very soon. I started off by asking Lauren about winning the Text Prize and what the reaction to the book has been like now that it has been out for a few weeks. Lauren, welcome to Date with a Debut.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. I'm coming to you today from the land of the Gayamagal people of the Eora Nation.
It is so lovely to have you here on this podcast and to talk about this beautiful, amazing book, The Best Witch in Paris. For everyone who has the video setting of this podcast, I am holding it up to the screen right now. It is beautiful. I first of all just want to shout out, with this book, you won the 2023 Text Prize with this, which fire effort. That's insane. Already a massive stamp of approval. I mean, how does it feel to actually hit the ground running with a debut novel and winning such a cool prize?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's amazing. I don't think it's really truly sunk in yet, but winning the Text Prize changed my life, really. I was sort of writing for about 10 years. Seriously, I'd say, in between motherhood and work. And when I won the Text Prize, it was one phone call and I was a literary award winner. I had a contract and I was working with my dream editor. So yeah, it was amazing. Still is amazing.
Is it? Do you get like those moments of imposter syndrome? I feel like that's the universal experience that so many authors have. They're like, I didn't do that. Was that me that won that and pulled that off? No way.
Oh, definitely. I think that's just a lot of the author, isn't it? I think that self-doubt that comes with the territory. I think that's why we write about it so much as well.
It's true. Look, when we're stuck in a room writing words and putting words together, it's just a constant companion. But successful the book has been. We have the benefit with this particular podcast is that the book has been out for a little while, and what has the reaction been like? I mean, when you're getting acclaim from the likes of Jacqueline Moriarty, you're doing all right. Has there been any funny stories about the reactions to the book? Have you gotten any funny messages from fans who've been like, I love this and this and this, or this particular, Luna is me, I am Luna, or anything like that?
I've had some really lovely messages, to be honest. I think some really, really lovely feedback, and including from some young readers, which I think is as a children's author, that's just the best kind of feedback when a kid gets in touch to say how much they love the book. So I've had a little bit of that, and that's been really lovely.
Have any of them made you cry? Because if I was in that position, if I had written a kid's book and a kid had told me this was the best book they'd ever written, I think I would burst into tears. I wouldn't be able to emotionally process it.
Yeah, look, I did get a little bit teary. I had an email or a message from someone whose daughter had read the book, and it was, the first kind of big proper novel that she'd read, and she read it in 3 days. She loved it so much, and they went to find some other books that I'd written and discovered there were none yet.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So that was lovely.
Oh, that is so sweet. What a lovely email to get. Oh, man, that would make the day.
Yeah, it did. That's exactly what I told her.
Well, let's talk about this book, The Best Witch in Paris, again, published by Text Publishing. We're now at the point of the podcast where I like to ask the author about their 1-minute pitch, their elevator pitch for this book. So tell me, what is The Best Witch in Paris about?
Okay, well, gosh, authors hate pitches, don't they? All right, I'll do my very best. The Best Witch in Paris is the story of an almost 13-year-old French witch called Luna who goes on an adventure with a very small and troublesome boobook owl and learns a lot about herself along the way. It's a story of or about belonging and finding out who you are.
I think you nailed it pretty well. Good sales pitch. Yeah. Enough to hook people in and bring more. You always feel like you never quite get the use of the sales pitch, and then even when you're doing it like the 100th or the 200th time, you're just like, is it the same one? Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I just every time I have to do one.
It honestly does feel like that, doesn't it? It really does. Before we actually dive into the actual book itself, we talked a little bit about it beforehand, but I just wanted to shout out the cover of this book, which is absolutely stunning. I love me some plated gold. I love me purples. And of course, I love a beautiful backdrop of Paris in the background.
Yes.
First thoughts when you saw this cover. I mean, can you first of all shout out the illustrator who put this beautiful cover together? You must have been so chuffed to have seen this. And
so this is Christina Kister's work, the wonderful Christina Kister. And the cover design was Imogen Stubbs from Text, and they just did the most wonderful job. I think the first time I saw it, I had sort of underestimated the impact it would have on me, and it was a sketch at that point. It was just very much an early draft. But that night I did not sleep at all. I was just so excited. I think it was the first time I'd, really seen Luna brought to life, and Silver, which is the other sort of main character, the boobook owl in the story. So it was just wonderful, and I just loved it from the get-go. I couldn't have dreamt up a better cover.
It is stunning. It is such a gorgeous book. And I mean, I think some, YA middle grade book covers are some of the best in the whole industry. And I think this one is no exception. This is a great story. It's kind of, as you mentioned at the top, it's about the discovery of yourself, who you are, self-confidence. It's about friendship. It's about meeting challenges, as well as the story of someone finding their place in the world. Plus witches, which I like. I love the environment, first of all, of the Witches' Quarter that you set up in Paris that our protagonist, Luna, finds herself in. They're kind of true to the actual form of the actual cover of the book. There's a lot of warmth. There is a lot of color to this world, which I love. Maybe it's because from my own personal connections, I've been recently getting into, I just came back from a trip overseas, and I've been getting into Studio Ghibli movies and that style. So I immediately, when I was seeing this crazy environment, I was immediately drawn to that, connection of fun, earnest, whimsical, fun storytelling, similar to something that you'd see like Kiki's Delivery Service, like that beautiful movie. But Luna, she rides a battered, temperamental old broom. Sometimes her magic works. Sometimes it doesn't act or work the way she would like to, or doesn't act at all. Out of curiosity, what is it about the coming of age story, but also specifically through the lens of the world of witches and fantasy?
I mean, it's everything. I mean, I think, gosh, how do I answer that? Look, I think that for me, it's just based on a personal preoccupation more than anything else. They're just things that I love. And, when I write and when I'm writing without constraints, I sort of return to these same ideas over and over again. And certainly I think that I love coming of age stories. I love any kind of story that has, a magic element in it. Generally, I sort of prefer fantasy that's set in the real world, so sort of what would be called urban fantasy, I guess, or low fantasy, though I don't really like that term. Where sort of people or witches in this case, are sort of concerned with everyday things and how magic can address everyday concerns. That's sort of what I'm interested in doing when I'm writing.
I think that's what makes it work so well, is because there's a connection between, there's the fantastical element of such a world with witches, but then the actual relating it to key things that every human experiences, in their journey. First of all, I love Luna. Like, she's such a great character to kind of portray the lens of this world that you have. One of the things that I was first drawn to about Luna was I just love her resourcefulness. Like, she's so capable, even if despite her challenges, she's so capable and likable on the page. And she's aiming to discover who she is. She's kind of learning from these three aunts who've taken them under her wing, and then all of a sudden her life gets thrown into an absolute loop when she comes across an animal with actual wings, which is an Australian boobook owl in the Lost Forest, Silver. Please just, I need to tell me about this dynamic. I love these two characters together. They're so much fun. Tell me about Luna and Silver, because they're so great.
They are so much fun, aren't they? And I think probably it would be helpful to first explain. So in the world of the Best Witch in Paris, familiars are really, really important to witches, and they sort of function as a magical friend and a helper, and every witch has to have a familiar. And sort of the key thing is that you don't get to choose your familiar chooses you. And if you don't know at once why that familiar is right for you, you will soon find out. And I think as the book goes on, Luna sort of discovers why Silver, this really fussy, troublesome little boobook, very prickly, she sort of finds out why she's exactly right for her.
Yeah, I do think the dynamic between these two are so great. And I will give a mild spoiler here, and that is, of course, the fact that Silver is actually Madame Valadon, who is kind of the eponymous best witch in Paris for this book, is actually the owner of Silver. Which definitely throws a couple of key questions into the loop around, what happens when you find yourself in this particular situation, but particularly in an environment like that you have with witches, where having a familiar is so important. Tell me a little bit about Madame Valadon, because so much is of what Luna does and how she struggles with this situation is also framed by that ever-present, overhanging presence of this Madame Valadon, of this best witch who has so much reputation around her.
Yes, so Madame Valadon is sort of a fabulous, very crafty and cunning and cantankerous villain in the story. And of course she claims that Silver the boobook is her familiar, even though she already has a familiar of her own, which happens to be a python that she likes to wear draped around her body, called Titu. And I think Madame Valadon is very fixated on being the best witch in Paris at any cost. And I think that is ultimately sort of her undoing in the story. And it sort of goes to, the larger themes that I was sort of exploring in the book around belonging and self-doubt. And, belonging is really an antidote to self-doubt. But Madame Valadon hasn't sort of worked that out yet. But, she's a wonderful character. I do love Madame Valadon. And she's, she gets the ending that she deserves in the best possible way. And I think she finds her own, sense of belonging in the end, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that theme, that ever-present theme of belonging is extremely present when you have that direct comparison between when you have the direct comparison between Madame Valadon and Luna. For someone who is so claims to be so strong and so incredible, she does suffer and she doesn't feel quite present there. It makes her so fun to actually just see on the page because, like you say, she is so there's so much to digest. I feel like a villain, or the equivalent of a villain, is such a character that that you can often really get drawn in on them. It's so fantastic. I also actually, in addition to Madame Valadon, I actually wanted to shout out the three sisters as well, who are so critical and important part of Luna's journey to becoming a witch. Tell me a little bit about these three aunts of Luna.
Oh gosh, the aunts are so wonderful. They
are. I love them.
I don't know if I can say that about my own characters, but I love them so much. Aunt Agnes and Aunt Henrietta and Aunt Jessie, they sort of found Luna as a baby and have raised her as a witch, and they are just, they're so loving. They're full of, eccentricities, and they're just so much fun. They're always getting up to some sort of mischief, even though I think they would claim they weren't. And they're just, they're such a loving presence in Luna's life, I'll say that. And they're also just so much fun. They're kind of, dream aunts to have, really. And they sort of came out of my own family. I knew that I had a bunch of aunts on my father's side who were just really constantly meddling and just getting in everybody's business. And so I had been writing about these aunts in one way or another for years on and off, but I'd never kind of found the right place for them. And I finally did in this story. So I was really happy to have them there. So, yeah, a lot of love for the aunts.
I do feel like as well, like I think it's such a good message to have such fun auntie characters. To be like, you do realize as an adult, adults can have fun too and be really like have a lot of element of play in their teachings and learnings for Luna, and it's a key part of the happiness that leads her to her developing her own self-confidence. It's such a beautiful part of the story that's included.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
I also wanted to shout out the actual place itself. This book jumps back and forth between Paris as well as Melbourne. We go to Australia here. And, of course, it is so bloody present in the zeitgeist. But immediately whenever you think of fantasy and witches and magic, Harry Potter is the first thing that comes to mind, particularly in an international context. But put that aside, throw that to the side. What is it like actually creating a lens of magical, environments and laws in different places and applying it not just to the Parisian context, but the Aussie context as well, and where magic fits within both those societies and environments?
Yeah, it was just so much fun, and I didn't really set out thinking I'm going to set this book in Paris and Melbourne, but it just sort of... Again, everything just comes out of my own preoccupations. I love both those cities. Those cities are very magical cities to me. And as I wrote, it just sort of, from the opening page, it was set in Paris, and then suddenly we were in Melbourne. So there you have it. It was just sort of the way it worked out. But it was really fun to create two quite different environments. One, we have sort of this very enclosed neighbourhood within Paris, where witches just can kind of do whatever they want and nobody's really watching them. And then we've got Melbourne, where witches kind of blend in and they just live amongst everyone else. And so it was really fun looking at those two different ways that, people could be witches, and how, how magic would work in those kind of very different contexts. It was lots of fun. And also I think, it kind of spoke a bit to, Paris has this really wonderfully strong neighbourhoods, and so I kind of was playing on that as well, of course.
I love it. Having been to Paris once or twice, it's very, very clear how much it comes off the page, and there's a clear love for that city and that place, which is so infectious. No spoilers. We were not going to spoil the ending of this book and the situation that unfolds between Luna and Madame Valadon and Silver. But you've kind of alluded to it a few times in this podcast, talking about themes and things that you fall back on and stuff that has been consistent within your previous experiences. Actually, having the chance, even though these are stuff that you've kind of looked at and examined before, what did actually writing this book teach you in terms of either looking at those perspectives or in other ways?
Oh gosh, it taught me so much, I think. I think that especially when it taught me a lot even about writing, of course, but if we're putting that to one side, it taught me a lot about, well, I'm going to say a lot about belonging, a lot about courage, a lot about, self-doubt and how we can overcome it. I really, I think in creating characters who we watch and go through all these sort of really big challenges in their lives, it teaches us how to, deal with them ourselves, I think. It's, I admire Luna enormously. I couldn't do what she does. She's wonderful. But, particularly belonging, I think, was really sort of the key thing I took away from this book, and really that ultimately love is the answer to any question around belonging. And that's sort of what Luna walks away with at the end of the story. So I think that's what I would be taking away from it.
I want to now ask you a little bit about your journey to publication, if I can, because as we mentioned at the top, you suddenly one day you were working on a manuscript, and then the next day you'd won a major prize, and had a publisher and were working with an editor who you adore and admire. What actually does the process of winning a major prize do within the process of actually writing and putting a book together? Is it the same, as pitching it to anybody, or is it suddenly like you've got this particular manuscript and it's won a prize and an award, and suddenly here you are? What does it do?
Oh gosh, it does everything. I mean, I think, my journey to publication was not an easy one, and I think that is, it really is easy. Of course you hear stories, anyway. It was not an easy journey to publication for me. I studied creative writing at uni. I worked in book publishing. I worked in editorial policy for years. I was always writing, but I sort of only started writing seriously probably about, I'd say, 10 years ago, give or take. And at the same time, I was sort of navigating motherhood and work alongside my creative life. So, it's difficult. It's, choosing to be a writer is a really difficult path, so I think that it's always good to acknowledge that, because it's never going to be easy, and it was not easy for me. And I think just before I had started writing The Best Witch in Paris, I'd sort of come to terms with the fact that I might never be a published author, but that I was going to keep writing anyway. And that was really liberating for me. I think what it really liberated me from was this fear that at some point I was going to have to call it and say, I've got to stop writing now and try something else. That, when my whole being was screaming out, you need to be a writer, I just sort of thought, well, at some point I'm going to have to stop. And so I think once I accepted that I could go on writing even if I wasn't a published author, I think from that point I sort of wrote without any constraints, and that was really the best thing that could have happened to me. So then when I sat down to write The Best Witch in Paris, I just kind of went for it, and I just did whatever. I wrote what I wanted to write about, and I wrote it the way that I wanted to write it. And so, I wrote it in sort of a 6-month block when I was on long service leave, and, it was the happiest 6 months of my life, really, I think. And then I entered the text prize. I think it was like 2 hours until the award closed, and I entered it, and then I sort of forgot about it because, you just assume nothing's going to come.
You're never going to get it. Yeah.
Of course. And so I think for a while my manuscript was sitting out by the recycling bins and then I sort of took pity on it and moved it to the shed. And then I got the email to say that I'd been shortlisted for the text prize, and the manuscript came out of the shed at that point and into the house. I mean, this is all symbolic. Obviously, I have a digital manuscript, but, it came back into the house. And then I think a few days after that, I got a call from Text, which I missed. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I called them back, and Nikki from Text told me that I'd won. And I just remember I sort of fell on the floor. And then she told me that I was going to be working with Jane Pearson, who is Helen Garner's editor. And I fell on the floor for a second time. And then, that night I remember I sat out on our back deck, and there was just birds everywhere. I mean, I live in Sydney, and there's birds, but there was just an astonishing number of birds. And I sort of felt like the universe might be celebrating with me that night. And then I also sort of felt like Luna was right there sitting with me, that night she sort of drifted out of the world of the novel and, into my world just for a few hours. So it was very special.
Magical. Love it. That's such a good way to. I do love the stories when you find out the moment that the dreams become reality when it comes to getting published. Would that be the? I love that the actually like saying kind of coming to terms with the fact that you might not have been an author was actually quite liberating. Is that probably a good piece of advice that you'd pass on to aspirational authors or authors who were in a similar position to you?
Definitely. I think that it was, it was a painful process to come to terms with that because I had always thought I would be published. But in the end, it was just so liberating because it meant that I knew that I would be writing for the rest of my life. And that's what I needed to know, I think, at that point, that, for those of us who do write, it's, it's just a compulsion and it's just so much a part of who you are that trying to turn it off is, just terrifying and awful and usually unsuccessful, I'll say. I think no one has been more committed to giving up writing than me at various points. But, in the end, I just couldn't do it.
I love that. Like, no one's like, even if you have periods of writer's block or whatever, you still couldn't stop, which is such a nice thing to know if you are someone who's like going, will I actually get published or not? Will that ever happen? But if it's meant to be, you can't stop yourself from doing it.
You don't need permission from a publisher to write. I think that's sort of key to being able to write and to become the artist that you want to be, I guess.
While I actually have someone who has kind of written in the YA middle grade, etc. kind of space, I do actually have a particular, question in regards to that with YA and kids' books, and because I think there's a really great quote which is attributed to some musician, I think, which is, little children and senior citizens don't lie. They tell you exactly how they're feeling, and trying to strike a balance with an audience and writing for an audience like that would be a very unique, difficult challenge. And judging by the response that that this book has gotten, you've nailed that. You've nailed that challenge. People love that voice and that and space. How does one strike a balance to write for children and for a younger audience?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm still working that out as I go. I think that I tend to write for my I write for my 12-year-old self. That's sort of what I think about when I'm writing. But I'm also writing for my grown-up self because, I was once a child and I still love to read children's literature. So I think that, of course, children deserve their own literature and I write for children first and foremost, but I would like to think that this sort of fiction welcomes everybody and that it has something for everybody. That's certainly what I find. I love reading middle grade fiction particularly.
I've been converted, I will admit, doing this podcast, I've been converted to reading it a lot. It is actually really, really fun if you're someone who thinks, oh yeah, I can't, I shouldn't read a book that's aimed at a younger audience. No, you absolutely should. It'll make you feel so much better. What's next for you? Will we see more adventures with Luna?
I hope so. I'm sort of working on the next book in that series. So we'll see what happens.
Ooh, exciting. Please do. I want to poke more, but I know that I can't. We'll finish off the podcast with I like to call it a rapid fire part of the show where I fling a bunch of questions at you and then you kind of give me the first answer that comes to your head. Okay. And that's how we roll with it. I have given you a little bit of preparation for, as with other episodes in this show, I've given you kind of a little bit of heads up about the first two questions about your book tastes. So my first question is, what is your favorite book that you have read in the last 12 months?
I'm going to say The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington, which is sort of this wonderful, surreal, slightly apocalyptic novel with a 92-year-old protagonist who just makes unexpected choices the entire way through the book, and who is just, I mean, she does it with so much joy and so much humour that I just, it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
92-year-old protagonist sounds so nice. I mean, like, just follow through her voice and her world. That would be so good.
I think probably nice is not the right word to describe it, but I won't spoil it by saying any more. But
I mean, I haven't read it, so I haven't read it.
It's wonderful, though. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your favourite debut novel that you've ever read? So we're talking ever.
Ever. I'm going to say 2, if I'm allowed. I hope that's
okay.
I mean, there's probably many, many more, but I'm going to say Marie Darrieussecq's Pigtails, which, sort of changed my life when I read it at uni. It was just, showed me what was possible in literature, so I've got to say that one. And the other one is Dodie Smith's I Captured a Castle, which is just completely delightful coming-of-age story. I have to choose at least one children's book, although that sort of is a bit of, appeals to everyone again. But it has, it's a wonderful book.
Do you have a favourite word?
Look, I don't, but I will say cosmos for today, because it sort of suggests a universe that's orderly and harmonious, and that's sort of what I aim for in my writing. So I've been thinking about that a little bit lately. So I'll say cosmos for today.
That's a great word. It's not just because of the the connotations, but also just because it feels like
it is a nice word.
It's a nice word.
It's a very complete word. Yeah,
it is. You suddenly find yourself in the witch quarters of Paris. What's the first thing you do?
Oh, I'd go and visit Luna, of course, in her half of the house.
I was gonna say, like, hang out with the aunts, or like I didn't want to like preempt the answer to that particular question. But,
yeah, no, I mean, I guess I'm hoping the aunts would be there as well. Let's say that, but definitely it would be, visiting Luna.
Absolutely. If a Bubugal actually suddenly arrived on your doorstep right now, you open the door, and it's sitting there. What's the first thing you'd do?
Oh, look, I'd probably call Wires and ask if I can feed it. I'd be very worried if there was a bibble cow sitting outside my door, because the only time that's ever happened has been when, an animal's injured, and it will often wait out on the back, at the back door waiting for some help. So I hope that never happens, to be honest. I'm happy to see one in a tree, though.
If you could live in any fantasy world, which one would you choose and why?
Oh, look, I'm going to say the Witches' Quarter of Paris, because it's a world that I have been living in more or less for the past, I guess, probably 2 years. I've been drifting in and out of it, but I'm pretty comfortable there, to be honest. Pretty happy there.
I mean, it is a pretty nice part of the world.
It
is pretty nice in there. And then last question, are you happy?
I'm very happy, wonderfully happy.
Yay. I love this. Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been so nice chatting to you about this beautiful book, The Best Witch in Paris, which, if everyone listening, you can get a copy of it. It's out. It's out in the world right now. It's published by Text Publishing. It won the Text Prize. So it's gotten a seal of approval from me. Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been a pleasure having you on Date with a Debut.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, or indeed any episode of Words and Nerds, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. It is hugely appreciated. Catch you soon.